Excellent question. On the ex-offender side, the AB 109 partnerships, the community corrections partnerships, have all the right partners at the table. So what we're hoping to do with the 2060 funds and other accelerator grant funds is to build those partnerships and build them out to include the workforce development system so we can get the employment outcomes we want. So the way we're targeting that population are a couple things. Number one, through the community corrections partnerships, so connecting with parole and probation and mental health in the courts and intervening there on the employment side. But also, we work very closely with corrections, state corrections, on programs. We had for several years a New Start program that allowed offenders who are released and they go back to the communities to connect to local workforce boards and one-stop career centers, get the kind of employment services they need to get skills that are going to be competitive in the labor market. So we've got a couple of ways of making sure we access that population. A very important connection, however, are community-based organizations who traditionally work with this population. And on the 2060 development of the RFA and thinking through what works and what we need to take to scale, we had several communications and conversations getting input from community-based organizations, largely through PolicyLink, which is a state board. Actually, it's a national organization that helps to bring coalitions together. In general, getting the kinds of services needed to at-risk populations with barriers to employment, the federal dollars target low-income adults, at-risk youth, and dislocated workers. So the Federal Opportunity Act Title I funds target those populations that most need assistance. But again, working with community-based organizations and other local partners like social services, we're able to get the employment services to where they're most needed. The trick, though, I think we've done a pretty good job of getting services to the people who most need it. What we're trying to do is raise the bar on employment outcomes, and that's where the sort of strategic planning and thinking comes from, where we've got to connect these programs to actual jobs. Because I think what the president used to say, or still does say, the vice president, we got to stop this train and pray, where we provide employment services, send people out on the street to kind of fend for themselves in labor markets. We need to make that direct connection to jobs.
One of the interesting points of the new federal law is that it really attempts to expand the role of the local workforce investment board to really be a facilitator and a convener and a connection maker at the local level. So as Tim says, it touches sources of intake, whether it's nonprofit groups, whether it's churches, all the sources of increasing the capability of identifying the type of at-risk individuals that really need to find their way into these programs.
Assemblymember Kansachu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This Opportunity Act is a replacement of JTPA.
It's a replacement of the Workforce Investment Act that was approved by Congress in 1998.
Okay. I just have a quick question. When we developing this regional plans, do we have any budget constraint? Do we have a dollar amount to work with? Or are we just blue sky the plan and then trying to get as much money as we possibly to implement as much as we can in the plan? Do we have an overall budget constraint?
The local workforce investment boards will ultimately be included in these state designated regions. The development of the regional plan will be a responsibility then of all the participants within this region. The allocation of existing formula funds to the local boards could in part support the governance structure and the planning process. There may be grant allocations from the U.S. Department of Labor to support the early stage development and structuring of these regional plans, although that's not completely clear.
The question is to implementing when we do this regional plan. Do we know how much money that we have to implement the regional plan?
At this point, implementation relies on the allocation of approximately $344 million out to the 49 local workforce investment boards. Those boards could combine elements of their funding stream around the implementation of regional priorities.
The $344 million is a commitment from the Fed.
Was this year's formula-based allocation from the U.S. Department of Labor. The amount that states get is based on an allocation formula that looks at population and levels of distress. That could change slightly from year to year. When the new Federal Opportunity Act was approved, it built in about a 5% annual increase in the total pie that goes out to states, although that has not yet been approved by Congress.
I'm just hoping that this dollar amount is clearly, given to the regional, whoever is involved developing the regional plan, so they can kind of work with the budget that they have, instead of developing a regional plan, in blue sky, and find out that we only have a small portion of it to implement a small portion of their regional plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to my left? Ms. Brown.
I have a couple of questions. One, I think I'll start with the easiest one. You were saying that we don't need a 4-year degree program, or we don't need 4-year education, and I'm starting to hear that more and more. I'm wondering, did you really mean that?
Yes. It's really looking at the labor market and what's going to be in demand in terms of skills. And data from George, actually a lot of sources point to the reality that most jobs in the labor market don't require a 4-year degree. That doesn't mean that education and training shouldn't provide the opportunity to get a 4-year degree for every student who wishes to pursue a 4-year degree. Education and training programs at the K-12 level and community colleges and apprenticeship programs that are employer-based should always allow young people and adults who are turning to education to get their skills upgraded the opportunity to get 4-year degrees. But in reality, the labor market requires more middle skill jobs and middle skills than high skilled 4-year degree.
I think Janet Napolitano and Mr. Tim White would be would say that they don't think that that's true, but we'll move on. The other thing I wanted to ask you is you talked about building relationships with this accelerator grant, and you wanted to build relationships with community-based organizations and churches and that kind of those kind of groups. How are you going to help them fund that?
We have very little money at the state level. The discretionary money is a very small pot. So we're not going to be able to fund the kind of programs that make meaningful impacts on employment just with our little bit of funds discretionary funds, I should say. Most of the dollars are in state and federal funding streams that are implemented locally and regionally. What we need to do is put those existing dollars to work in new ways by breaking down silos and getting to some scale. The community-based organizations, and especially faith-based groups, often contract with local providers, government providers, and those dollars will continue to be there. But if we don't get the kind of alignment we're talking about, we're not going to make the kind of meaningful impact on employment that we need to in the state.
I think
so it's really about bringing resources together.
I think we have to be really careful because you depend on the churches and you depend on the community groups. And where do they get the funds from? They get it from the parishioners and from the members and from that same community. And if you come from a really poor community, then you don't have the kind of resources. Now, if you're in a wealthier community, let's say, then maybe that works. But when everyone is poor, what happens? And how do we fashion a proposal or grants so that you can get in there and do the work? I know some of the ministers in my community really became very concerned that they had to take their money or the parishioners' money and use it for some of the programs when that wasn't what it was. That wasn't what they were. That wasn't their what they were supposed to be doing, I should say. So I just want to caution us that let's not depend so much when we're not giving them the funds for them to do the work.
Right.
Assemblymember Bro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your testimony today. You talked a lot about the new workforce plan that will be ready in the fall of 2016, probably realistically out to folks looking for jobs in 2017. My question is, what are you doing right now? What are your current programs to align folks who are looking for work for jobs that are out there now, and what kind of outreach do you have to let them know about your programs?
The workforce system currently operates under plans that were developed through the Workforce Investment Act. Even though the law becomes fully operational on July 1st, 2015, the state board and the local workforce investment boards all continue to operate for 1 year under the plans that are in place under the Workforce Investment Act. And those plans certainly have to address all the issues in terms of identifying candidates, identifying special populations, identifying partnerships that bring distressed or disadvantaged individuals into the training opportunities that are offered by the Workforce Investment Act. When the new plan when the state plan is adopted on July 1st, 2016, then the state rolls under the governance structure of that new plan.
Thank you. Second, I really like your talk about apprenticeships. I think that's a lost art, a young person who can go in, someone who has a wealth of knowledge and a career and get on-the-job training. Could you talk a little more, elaborate a little more on your thoughts on expanding the apprenticeship programs?
The governor's budget includes an expansion of the opportunity for new slots in traditional apprenticeship, and it increases the reimbursement per hour for classroom instruction. The budget also includes $15 million for expanding into those non-traditional sectors. We've created an apprentice task force at Labor Agency that involves all of our workforce entities plus the Division of Apprenticeship Standard and the community college. And the purpose of that task force is really to develop an outreach structure that allows us to convey the value of non-traditional apprenticeship to employers, the benefits of bringing young people into paid learning types of situation, whether it's a paid internship in a tech sector. All those types of opportunities help that young person move into the middle wage types of jobs that have been disappearing in our economy.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
If I could add, we've also been working on building a kind of a pre-apprenticeship infrastructure in the state that connects underserved populations to high-wage, high-skilled jobs in construction through apprenticeship. We've invested the little bit of Prop 39 funds the state board has to pilot 5 or 6 of these pre-apprenticeship programs around the state. In fact, one is in Sacramento that is helping to fund the Priority Worker Program that got a front-page story in the SAC-B a couple of weeks ago, and it talked about faith-based groups in Sacramento working closely with the Workforce Board and the construction trades in Sacramento to develop pre-apprenticeship programs to get more underserved communities access to jobs on the arena construction project. That kind of example is going on around the state, and I think it speaks to the great role that community-based organizations play in working with traditional skills training programs and local workforce boards and community colleges.
To Ms. Brown's question earlier on the 4-year pathway, we see apprenticeship as an option for young people that may not seek a 4-year degree but yet want to move into a rewarding and quality type of job. So it's about offering more options to individuals that may move through these various stages of certificate, 2-year degree, apprenticeship, and then on to a 4-year degree. Our economy needs individuals with all those types of backgrounds.
I think our Vice Chairwoman has a question, and then just to remind the members, we will have an opportunity to bring these two gentlemen back if there are any other questions after next two panelists, but the floor is yours.
Thank you both for being here. It was really interesting, and I learned a lot today, too. I just wanted to make some observation that I had while visiting many of the industries in my district, as I mentioned earlier, and also visiting some of the community colleges. It was very eye-opening for me how they are taking the initiative to work with the existing employers. And some of the employers actually are taking their own initiatives to educate their current workforce and to prepare them for the better job than what they're currently having. For example, in my district, in Fullerton College and Cypress College have been really taking the leadership in working with the local businesses, such as Disneyland, for example, have identified their employees and really train them and also invest in them by sending them to local community colleges. If they were working in one department and if they want to move on and try some other career path in becoming, let's say, a machinist or doing something else that is different than what they're doing, the employer will actually invest in their employees and sending them to receive their necessary certificate degree programs. And then they will actually bring them back on and have them place them in different departments. This is something I think it goes quite well with what we're discussing, preparing the next workforce and preparing them for the jobs that is already available. So instead of trying to create from, like starting from scratch, I think we need to review some of the best practices that's already taking place, and if we can incorporate that into what we're trying to do, I think that would be a win-win for a lot of people. So it's more of a comment and observation I had, and working with the labor agency and workforce investment, I think this is something that we can really reach out and maybe work with individual districts and the legislators and see what they're already doing, because I'm taking a very proactive approach in trying to find out, instead of, there's so limited funds available from the state and the federal governments. And so if we can encourage private sectors that are already doing some good things and then see if we can encourage them, and as we have these grant allocation through these programs as we're rolling them out, if there is incentives we can provide to the employers if they are going to reinvest in their existing employees and trying to, promote them to a different level of occupation, I think we need to be more proactive in those areas.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Absolutely. That was so well said. The best programs, the best employer-based programs that I know of, and I've been around this stuff probably too long, were seeded with employment training panel funds, local workforce board, incumbent worker training funds, community college, contract ed, not to sustain those programs long-term with employers, but it was enough to get in the door with employers so they saw the real value of it. And that brings the employer investment in. And that's the only way to really sustain these wonderful training programs. Apprenticeship, for example, isn't funded primarily with public dollars. It's funded primarily with private sector dollars that pay for wages while workers are learning on the job and for benefits. So to really get to the big aim, to the end game here, is to get greater investment from the private sector. We just can't do it with our public dollars alone.
And that connects into the sector-based structures that the New Opportunity Act is pushing, where you actually have community colleges designing degree-based curriculum that reflects the talent needs of a large portion of their local employer community. There are great models of that around the state, but we certainly hope to expand those types of programs.
Mr. Rainey, Mr. McMahon, thank you. I hope that you will stick around in the case that there are other questions that come up, but thank you once again for being here this morning.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Deborah Jones with the Office of the Community College Chancellors and Mr. Jim Mayer with President and CEO of California Forward. If you please step forward. We'll start with Ms. Deborah Jones. good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I send regrets and greetings from Vice Chancellor Von Quinlivan, who is presenting to the Board of Governors at this exact same time. You've been provided with a PowerPoint, or you are being provided with a PowerPoint currently, and I'm going to go through it. I'm going to talk about the community college's role in the larger initiatives that are going on now. Vice Chancellor Von Quinlivan came on board about 3.5 years ago, and she brought me from the California Department of Education, where I was serving as State Director of Adult Education. The first thing that we did was to begin to map our investments. So we had SB 1070 dollars, which were then SB 70 dollars, about 48 million. 15 million of those went directly to the Department of Education. We had $22.9 million of economic and workforce development funds, which we continue to have. And we had Carl D. Perkins Career Technical Education funds. About 6 million of those were discretionary funds. The rest were given to the local colleges to be used in their career tech ed departments. What we found with the mapping of investments were that there were lots of and many good programs out there, but they weren't connected. They weren't connected by the regional economies. They weren't connected by sectors. They weren't connected by labor market information. They were good programs. They weren't sustainable as they were. And so we used the regional economies regions, which are 15 regions and 7 macro regions. And we began to look at what it would take to braid our investments by sector and by region. We had each region determine 5 sectors, 3 priority sectors and 2 emerging sectors. They used their labor market information to do this. It was a 4-month process that they went through. And then we began to braid funds. We set up performance measures and common metrics for each of the funding streams and found that we had a continuum of metrics from 8th grade with the SB 1070 funds through employment and training with the Workforce and Economic EWD funds. We then targeted our investments through the grants to those regions. So instead of a college getting individual amounts or smaller amounts, regions got grants and funds targeted toward sectors and in specific regions. We put together a Doing What Matters. It was called the Doing What Matters initiative. We put together a Doing What Matters website, and on this you can see any of your regions. There's an interactive resource map. What we funded with these funds were 10 statewide sector experts, and then each region, depending upon the sector that they chose from their list of 10, we funded deputy sector navigators. And these are regional experts in the workforce sector and having worked with the colleges. So they're able to make the transition of those high school students who were leaving programs into the community colleges and hook them up with the employers and the workforce partners. There's another picture. You can see the LA region. If you go on the Doing What Matters website, click on your region, you can get instant information, labor market information, contacts for each of the sectors, the priority and emerging sectors. Another tool that was developed by the Chancellor's Office was called the Salary Surfer. And this is a tool that parents, students, counselors, educators, workforce, employers use. You go on and you look at the sector, the program area. You can not only find how much you'll be paid as an employee if you took that job, but you can also find which colleges offer those programs. It takes $66,000 for a family of 4 to live above the poverty line in California. The workforce and economic development work became critically important to the Chancellor's Office, and the Board of Governors established the Task Force on Workforce Job Creation and a Strong Economy. And you can see on the slide what that's intended to do. It's intended to prepare students for high-value jobs that currently exist in California, to position California's regions to attract high-value jobs from other states, to create more jobs through the workforce, that enable small business development, and to finance these initiatives from state and federal resources. And that's the braiding of our funds. It's also the braiding of other funds, the leveraging of other funds that go into a region. Mr. An, you were talking about the churches and the faith-based organizations. The WAI Title II literacy funds go directly to faith-based organizations and to community-based organizations. By leveraging those funds with the funds that can't go there, we have greater impact and stronger response. Why do we do this? And Mr. Rainey talked a little bit about this. California needs 1 million more AA certificates, degrees, or industry-valued credentials. And this information is in, not only on this slide, but in the packet that was prepared for you. Thank you so much. You did an excellent job on that packet. The Board of Governors has put together the task force, and it's rolling out now. In fact, yesterday there was a meeting in Sacramento. Tomorrow there'll be one in San Diego, regional and college faculty conversations, strong workforce town hall meetings. We have had up to 150 participate in these, many of them up to 70%, 80% employers at these meetings. So this is critically important for our colleges, for the education realm, but also for employers. Task force meetings will be happening monthly. The first one happened last month. And this task force, a small task force, it's about 30 people strong. We'll be putting together recommendations that will be given to the Board of Governors, and then we'll see if there's policy or legislation to follow. Doing What Matters website, I urge each one of you to go on to the website, look at the work that's being done, and thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll go on to Mr. Jim Mayer. He serves as the CEO of California Forward. California Forward is a bipartisan organization which was established in 2008 to bolster democracy and improve the performance of government in California. The organization partners with the California Stewardship Network to serve as the lead partners for the California Economic Summit. The floor is yours.